Hello, Dr. Peter.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I think it's time to start.
Okay.
So at the outset, let me thank our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor K.R.S. Sambasiva Rao. Under his leadership, we have been organizing many such webinars in very important topics, diverse areas, and it has been very beneficial for students as well as teachers and other participants. Today, we have a very young researcher, a dynamic researcher, Dr. Peter Josephat Kirigiti from University of Dodoma, Tanzania. He has earned his BA, MA, and PhD all in the subject of statistics from University of Dar es Salaam as well as University of Dodoma. He is deputy principal of the College of Natural and Mathematical Sciences and a senior faculty in the Department of Mathematics and Statistics in the University of Dodoma, Tanzania. His interests include applied statistics, particularly non-experimental design. Apart from academic activities, he is also acting as a consulting statistician and catering to the needs of various clients. And he has participated in many courses on data management and analysis, jointly organized by Africa Research Initiative, Research Implementation, Science and Education Network, in collaboration with McGoldrick Professional Development Program in Public Health. He was also involved in establishment of the health and demographic surveillance system in Dodoma, Tanzania. With these words, I welcome Dr. Peter and invite him to deliver the lecture. Over to you, Dr. Peter.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you for the introduction. As we have said, I'm Peter Josephat Kirigiti from the University of Dodoma, Department of Mathematics and Statistics. Currently, I'm the acting deputy principal of the College of Natural and Mathematical Sciences. The college has 4 departments: Department of Mathematics and Statistics, Department of Biology, Department of Physics, and the Department of Chemistry. So we have 4 departments under this college. So as you can see, we have a combination of statistics and other physical sciences. So all the courses which are naturally, then they are offered at this college. So I'm also very thankful that to join with you. I'll share, and I think we'll be having time to have a kind of discussion. Right now, I'm from central part of Dodoma, called Dodoma region, which is the capital city of Tanzania. Tanzania is the land of Kilimanjaro, which is the highest mountain in Africa. And we have a very large national park, which is called the Serengeti and the Ngorongoro crater. So today we are going to talk about the basics of surveys and the analysis designs. We'll cover the reason for us to conduct a survey as a researchers, and they also have a concept of a survey analysis. Then what are the things that we needed to consider when we are planning to conduct a survey? But the most important thing is that after having collecting the data and the information, it is very necessary to process, to analyze, and interpret, ready for the public to to make use of the information that is collected. So to start with, let us start with the reasons for conducting a survey. As we all know that basically in this world, it is very important and it is necessary. Often we need to discover the new facts. There are a lot of issues which are coming. The new ones of which we need, we as the researchers, we need to have the answers from those ones. So all the time we have to find the solutions to those issues. Then another issue which is very necessary for us to conduct a survey, sometimes we might be interested to verify or test theories. It can be the applied or the theoretical one. That's why also we conduct a survey. Also, sometimes we might be interested to establish the causal effects relationship. We have a certain scenario, then we wanted to find the reasons for that situation to happen. So if we want to establish the causal effects relationship, then it is very necessary that we conduct a survey. Sometimes also, we might be interested to develop new theories and find the solutions to the problems. For instance, we might be interested to make a comparison of the current world problem, which is COVID-19, against other pandemic disease. This is a new disease. There's a lot of information which we needed to understand about the COVID-19. Then how are we going to know or to solve those kind of problems? It is through conducting a survey. So we can have so many kind of survey from, for instance, from COVID-19. Others are intervention or strategies, but also on the other side, we can have the theoretical part of it. So all of us from across the disciplines, we can go for conducting this kind of research. Then, as we conduct a survey, we need also to take into account the kind of the surveys which we think we are interested with. We can have an observational survey. For instance, if you want to understand the life of an elephant, how are you going to collect information from elephant? Or sun, the movement of the sun. So basically, we'll go for the observational survey because it is very difficult to have any interaction with the respondents. Thinking about the establishment, the relationship between two or more variables, which is basically not for causal research. We can go for the correlation. The interest is just to see or to find the relationship between variables. We are not interested with the causal survey. Also, if we are interested with the establishment of the causal relationship, that means we'll opt for experimental design. Now, as we know that if you wanted to establish a causal relationship, the we need to have a random assignment, that the units of interest has to be random. We'll be having two groups in order to make a comparison, a control and a treatment group. So through experimental survey, it is where now we can establish a causal effect. Mind you that all these kind of the surveys, it is very important to be understood by the researchers so that we can have a plan for analysis. If we go for experimental survey, there is a way of doing analysis for the experimental survey. The same for the correlation, the same for the observation. So it is very important from the beginning to be aware of this one, because from this one, it is where you can build a case to adapt a certain kind of analysis from the data that you are going to collect. Consider also non-experimental design. In most cases, the subjects are not randomly assigned. So if this is the case, then we go for non-experimental design. We know that most of the governments have the different strategies. They can be the education, they can be healthy or agriculture strategies and interventions. In most cases, the subjects to be participated in those projects, they are not assigned randomly. So it is recommended that you go for the non-experimental design. So now here you can see that it is very important to know this kind of the surveys that you are going to conduct. Sometimes you might be interested to go for the exploratory survey. That means we have a very few, a new phenomenon, then we wanted to explore for the information. Then we'll go for this one, for sure. We'll be having a very limited literature review if we go for the exploratory study. Maybe for instance, like the case of the COVID, it's very new. So scientists, they are, all the day, they are working on that one to establish the facts. But also, if we are interested to just to have an overview of a certain problem, then we can opt for the descriptive survey. So after having a kind of introduction of why it is very important to conduct a survey, then let us discuss now the plan for the survey analysis. And we are going to see some of the issues which are very necessary and very fundamental to be adapted when we analyze the survey. It is very important that after conducting a survey, we need to have a very meaningful information. Of course, this includes presentation and interpretation. This is very important because you'll be planning for the survey, a researcher will be planning for the survey, but at the end of the day, in order for that survey to have a value, it is very important for the results to be communicated in the public. So we have to process those data. It is a very crucial step on to process or to adapt well steps and processes in order to have a very good analysis. We are saying that in order to have a meaningful information, the survey analysis and the plan should start very early during the survey design. We'll see it later. For instance, what is the nature of the variables and the data that are going to be collected? This one contribute and determine the test statistics to be adapted and the design plan, the nature of the variables, and the data to be collected. What is the sample size? There is the restriction. Do you want just to get an overview? Do you want to make inference to infer the population? Maybe from the sample? It is very important to plan in advance. Unless otherwise, the results that you are going to have will not reflect the population. From that one, the point of the nature of the variables and data. Basically, we have quantitative and qualitative. Under quantitative, that means we have a numeric data. We can count those data. For qualitative, we are collecting a non-numeric data, which involves examining and reflecting on the less tangible aspect of the research. So this qualitative, we are collecting non-numeric, while for quantitative, we are collecting numeric data. It is very important to know this one. For instance, if you are conducting a survey on attitudes, or maybe on perceptions, what is the perceptions of people on strategies which have been used to handle the problem of COVID-19? We have a kind of a qualitative survey. How are we going to make analysis? What is the plan? So we'll know well in advance that we have a qualitative study. Or unless otherwise, we can have a mixed approaches. That means this is a combination of a qualitative and a quantitative approaches. We have a survey which comprises of these two kinds of data, numeric and non-numeric. Then we will go for the mixed. Okay, then we have the qualitative and the quantitative. For qualitative, we can have a nominal or ordinal scale of measurement. Now, it is very important to know that the plan for analysis, this one also bears from what type of measurement of scale the data has. So normally for qualitative, we have a nominal or ordinal measurement of scale. For quantitative, which we are saying that we have numeric values, then we have discrete or continuous. That means we have integer, and we might have data which have fractions, which is continuous. And if we have data under which quantitative data, then the appropriate measurement of scale is interval or ratio. As I've said, for instance, for the case of this discrete data, for instance, if we are to find a number of participants who have joined this meeting now, we are going to have a numeric value, but it is an integer because we are not expecting that we are going to have a number of people, a fraction. For the case of continuous, then this one, it is the data which have infinity possibility. For instance, when you are talking about the arrival time, so we are expecting that here under arrival time, then we have a continuous data. We'll see it later that these are very important issue to know, because if we have a continuous data, it has an implication of which test statistics to be used. the same to integers, the same to qualitative data. Data, as I've said, is very, very important because the structure and the nature of data greatly affect the choice of analysis method. We have the way of analyzing the qualitative data, then we have the way of analyzing the quantitative data. But under quantitative data, we have a discrete and we have a continuous data. Now, as we know that having data, we need to apply the test statistics. So it is very appropriate. What is the nature of the dependent variable? Is the dependent variable qualitative or quantitative? What is the nature of the independent variables? Do we have a qualitative pure independent variables? Do we have quantitative pure variables? Or we have a mixture of qualitative and the quantitative for the case of independent variables? So it is very important, this one, to be known in advance. And it is very unfortunate that if we have limited statistical analysis for qualitative data compared to quantitative data. We have a reach of statistical analysis if we have, quantitative data. That's why, for instance, you can collect the information about the age. Are you collecting the actual values of age of the respondents? Or you have grouped? So it is recommended that you collect the actual values of the ages so that you can have a reach of statistical analysis rather than grouping or having the age groups, then you go and collect data. So the analysis will rather be limited because you'll be having a chance of grouping of creating age groups, even though you have collected the actual years from the respondents. So maybe a little bit above there, we have discussed about the measurement of scale. Maybe quickly, we can go through it and see what exactly we are meaning when we are saying the measurement of scale. Basically, we have 4 types of measurement of scale. We have nominal, we have ordinal, we have interval, and we have ratio. It is very important to be aware about the measurement of scale because this one determines the amount of information contained in the data. And it will direct you the appropriate test statistics to be used. To start with, there are 4 issues or properties which differentiate these 4 measurement of scale. One of the property is the property of identity. Another one is another property is the magnitude property. Then we have equal interval property, and then we have absolute zero property. Here we are saying that having a variables, each variables has a unique meaning. If, for instance, you have a variable of marital status, under marital status, we have the level of married. Married is quite different from single. Single is quite different from separated. So the expected response to the married marital status variable, we have, let's say, married, we have single, we have separated. So each value has a unique meaning. This is how it should be. Then we have the property of magnitude. Here, we have unique meaning for the values, but we have additional issue of order. So there must be, we can have a variable which has a certain order. For instance, somebody can ask, how are you satisfied by this presentation of Peter Josephat. Someone can say very satisfied, other can say satisfied, other can say not satisfied. Now the question is, under these values, is there any order? Probably yes. Another property is the property of equal interval. That means scale units along the scale are equal to one another. And the last property which differentiates this for measurement of scale is about the absolute zero. That means the scale has a true 0 point below which no value exists. For instance, take an example of consider temperature as a variable. Is temperature going to be, maybe will fall under equal interval, or will fall under absolute zero? Probably it will fall under equal interval, because under temperature, you can have a temperature of 0, you can have a temperature of -3, or you can have a temperature of 5. So these are the very important issues to consider when you are planning for the analysis, of a survey. Now, going back to the measurement of scale quickly, the first one is the nominal scale. The nominal scales, from the 4 properties, the property of identity, magnitude, equal interval, and the absolute zero, it satisfies only one property, and this is the property of identity. For instance, if you are saying sex, you can have either male and a female. Male has a unique meaning, female has a unique meaning compared to male. Now the question somebody can ask, is there any order under sex? Probably no. What about the colors? Red, blue, light blue, green? Is there any order? Probably no. But red is quite different to green, and the green is quite different to white. So we have a unique meaning. So that one is a nominal scale. So when you are planning for the analysis of survey, you have to determine whether your variables are under nominal scale. Another one is ordinal scale. Ordinal scale satisfies 2 properties. It satisfies the property of identity, and it satisfies the property of magnitude. That means if we have a variable which has ordinal scale, then we have to know that we have a variable which satisfies 2 properties. I have already mentioned, for instance, if you are talking about satisfaction, I think you can have a kind of a Likert scale. And that is Likert scale, there's a kind of a certain order. So if we have that kind of a variable, then we have an ordinal scale. But normally nominal scale and the ordinal scales falls to qualitative data or approach. So you can see that, how are you going to analyze a sex? How are you going to analyze a color variable? How are you going to analyze a satisfaction? Is it possible to compute a mean of a color or a mean of a sex? Are you interested to find the mean of the sex? The answer is no. We are restricted. Why? Because we have a qualitative variable which falls under nominal or ordinal measurement of scale. So your plan here is that probably this kind of measure of central tendency, it is not appropriate to be used for nominal scale, maybe. Another issue is about the interval scale. Interval scale satisfies 3 properties. It satisfies the property of nominal, it satisfies the property of ordinal, it satisfies the property of interval property. Consider an example of a student test scores. Do we have a nominal? Probably yes, if you put into groups. Do we have an element of ordinal? The answer is yes, because 90 is large compared to 8. So you can decide to arrange in ascending or descending order, etc. Do we have an interval scale? Interval property? The answer is yes. Having the difference of 90 and 80 or 70 and 10, we have an interval because they differ in 10 marks. Another one is the ratio scale. This ratio scale satisfies all the properties. It satisfies the property of nominal, of the identity. It satisfies the property of magnitude. It satisfies the property of equal interval. Very sorry here under interval scale, it should really satisfy the property of identity, the property of magnitude, and the property of interval, equal interval. So sorry for this one. It should not read nominal or ordinal, rather it should read identity and the magnitude. So ratio satisfies all the properties above. For instance, consider weight. Weight fall under ratio scales because we are not expecting to have -3 weight or height. We are not expecting to have -3 height. So under this ratio scale, we have the absolute 0. So colleagues, these are the things which you need to consider in relation to nature of the variables, the approach, qualitative, quantitative, against the measurement of scale. You have your idea, you are going to collect information, but here we are planning for analysis. These are the very important issue to consider. Another issue, apart from the nature of variables to be considered when we are planning for the analysis of a survey, it's about the sample size. Why sample size? It is because the world is large and full of people. So it is impossible all the time to go for the whole population. Now here we have a population and we have a sample. What we are supposed to be to consider when we are selecting a sample is the sampling procedure. How is the units be selected so that it present, we make an analysis of the sample, then infer the population. This is the thing that we need to work on. One of the challenge when you're using a sample is about to what extent do our results related to all people. You can have a study using a very modern equipment, but you did some wrong in the planning. You used the wrong sampling technique to select the sample. Obvious, you can have a wrong results. Then if you have a results, then you make an inference to the population, then people might doubt about your results. Another issue is that to what extent do they only relate to our sample? So these are the big questions that we needed to consider and be very careful when we are doing this one. Because we can establish a sample size. But are we going to collect data from all the targeted sample? If no, then the sample size might be affected. In some cases, the sample size also do determine a kind of test statistics to be used. We have test statistics which are used to analyze the small sample. We have a test statistics which can be used to analyze the large samples. And in some cases, there are requirements of a sample size for a certain test statistics. So it is very important to plan for this one. Now, under sampling, we have random and non-random. It is very important. Mind you that, for instance, you want to make an inference. How are you selecting? Are you going to use a random or non-random? Now, it depends on the situation. Are you going to have a simple or a complex? Better to have a complex because you are going to have several strategies and the techniques. For instance, we have a simple random sampling of which all the samples have an equal chance of being selected. But somebody can opt to go for the multi-stage. That means you are going to have to adapt several strategies. Somebody might be interested to go for cluster sampling or stratification. So these are very important issues to consider because here we are referring a representation. It's very important to have a very good sample that because we opt to go for the sample, then it is better we reduce the sampling error. We have a sample statistics. How is the sample statistics related to the true parameter? Is the sample statistics very close to the true parameter that if we could conduct it, or we could involve the whole population, then we have the sample. What is the difference? So if we have a very large difference between sample statistics and the true parameter, then we have a problem. The results that you are going to use, the analysis that you are going to use, then it will be of doubt. Is the sample representative? Is it economically viable? Is the sample, the survey sample, are you certain? Are you sure that will generalize the universe? This is a very difficult question to answer, of which now demand us as researchers to be very careful when you are selecting the sample. There's a question, as of now, to my knowledge, it is very difficult to say exactly under this or to have a rule of thumb on how large a sample should be. There are different scenarios, cases. What is the level of significance? What is the interest of the researcher to have of making an error? What about the accuracy? What about the precision? What about the economic factor? All these issues are considered to determine a sample size for a survey. So the most important thing is to consider this one. As a researcher, you have to make analysis, you have to present, then you have to make a justification. We have a basic, of course. If, for instance, it's the level of significance, we know that in many cases, we make use of 5%. We can also have a sample size using the sample size charts or to compute the sample size. We have proportional sample size, we have stratified, and so forth. Now, it depends with the nature of your survey that you are going to use. But here we are saying that you need to be very, very careful in determining the sample size. Coming to data analysis. Before data analysis, assumption is that all those issues now you have considered, you know the nature of your variables, you are very certain about your sample size, you have a very good sample. Now let us see how is data analysis correspond to what we have discussed about. We have discussed about whether the data to be numeric or qualitative. We have discussed the variable to be nominal or interval or ordinal or ratio scale. We have discussed about the issue of sample size consideration. Now let us see, as the researchers, as we adapt or perform an analysis of the findings from our survey, is it necessary to have those kind of issues? Here we are saying that it is very important that before you conduct or before you perform or before you do analysis, you have to clean your data. Cleanness, quality control. It is as usual. If we wake up early in the morning, you have to brush your teeth, you have to wash your face, you have to iron your clothes and whatever. The same to the data. Because sometimes data came with impurities. We have controlled, starting from the planning, starting from the collection. Maybe we have adapted the electronic way of collecting data. So there are so many constraints, but we cannot rule out that some of the impurities will come up to the stage of the analysis. So again, we have to cross-check our data. One is if the data have been entered correctly, but also if there's a missing values. The missing values affect the sample size. So if, for instance, you targeted the 3,000 respondents, then we have so many missing values. You end up having 80. So you have lose a lot of information. So it is better to cross-check the variables of interest if at all the respondents have responded to that question or we have data for analysis. Unless otherwise, we'll be having a missing, we mislead the public. Let us check for the outliers. We know the problem of the outliers. We know the effect. The outliers do affect the analysis. So we can have a very small value or we can have a very large value. So we need to check and control. There are several ways. Either you can approximate it to the highest or lowest value, or you can discard at all. Another one is, if for instance we want to especially for the parametric test, we have to check for the normality. Do we have data which are normally distributed? If at all we are interested with the parametric test. So we need to conduct an data audit to check for the quality and ensure that we have clean data, then it's where it is recommended you go for the analysis. Basically, there are two types of analysis. You can go for the descriptive, which is just an overview or the summary of statistics. This is analysis which just gives you an overview of a certain problem. Or you can go for the inferential. Now here, under inferential, that means we infer the population. We want to make generalization. How? By using statistical testing. Either we can adapt a parametric test, or we can go for the non-parametric test. So as you plan for the study, for the survey, you need also to know for the descriptive or for the inferential. Now see, in a few minutes ago, we discussed about the nature of the variables. For instance, for categorical variables. Then we discussed about quantity, qualitative and the quantitative. When we are preparing for the analysis, it is very, very important to consider. Now you can see now the connection from the above discussion. For instance, coming for the descriptive. We wanted to show specific variables. Then we wanted the frequency distribution. Is the frequency distribution appropriate for qualitative or quantitative? We wanted to show high and low values. We will go for the bar chart, for the histogram. We are interested to the show trend. We are going to the line graph. Now the question is, can we have a trend, or in order to have a line graph, are we going to have a line graph of a qualitative variable or data? Probably you might be interested with the quantitative data. What about the proportion? You'll go for the pie chart. For instance, if for instance you're interested with the interdependence, that means you'll go for the contingent table. You need to have a kind of the cross-tabulation. Now, if we do adapt a cross-tabulation, are we adapting a cross-tabulation for the qualitative or for quantitative variables? Of course, by nature, we'll be having a qualitative variable, though we can collect the quantitative variable, that means the response for that one. So as you can see, we are planning from the beginning. We have a survey, then how are we going to analyze our data? For instance, you're interested with to make a comparison of the highest and the lowest values. Probably you might be interested to go to the multiple bar chart. What about the proportion? You might be interested to go to the percentage component bar chart. This one is about comparison. So contingent table, multiple bar chart, percentage component bar chart, these one are recommended for comparison of a variable. This one, just you want to explore, you just want to present, you will go for the frequency distribution You'll go for the bar chart and histogram. You'll go for the line graph. You'll go for the pie chart. So now you can see now it depends on the interest of the research. But the issue here is to consider the nature of the variables that you have. For instance, you wanted to compare the trends and the conjunction. You'll go for the maybe multiple line graph. Consider you want to compare the proportion. You can go for the comparative proportional pie chart to the complex rarely. Of course, this is rarely used. What about if, for instance, you want to establish the relationship? You will go for the scattered diagram. Now here the question is, when is scatter diagram used? It is used when we wanted to see visually the relationship. Of course, you can have a scatter diagram, then later you can go for the advanced statistics. So here you can visualize. So coming here for the descriptive analysis, as you can see here, this one, we just wanted to have an overview, especially in terms of the graphs. For the descriptive, and we wanted to have the values. A single value may be referring to a certain problem. You can go for the measurement, for the summary of measures. For instance, mean and the mean. This is the measure of central tendency. You can opt to go for the standard deviation, which is the measure of dispersion. Or you can opt to go through the measure of distribution. Now the question is, you have conducted a study. Will you make an inference just basing on the descriptive statistics? Only just mean and the standard deviation and the range without applying any statistical test? Probably you will have the result of which will be doubted. Are you going to make an inference having just a frequency? I think the answer is no, because this one, a frequency and this summary of measures, they will just give you an overview. What about the cross-tabulation? This just permits to compare frequency information for the intersection between variables. Now, for the cross-tabulation, which type of data are you going to use or approach? Are you going to use a quantitative, a numeric interval or ratio measurement of scale to compute the cross-tabulation? Probably no. You'll be interested to have a categorical variables in order to cross-tab this one. The same here, you wanted to compute a mean. What is the recommended variables? For instance, you are interested with the standard deviation. What is the recommended variables? So as you can see, as you are planning to do analysis, it is very important to consider that one. I think I have 5 minutes. Then inferential. Then under inferential, we have either non-parametric test or parametric test. These are the most popular non-parametric tests. You want to adapt chi-square test. What is the nature of the variables? You want to adapt Mann-Whitney test. You want to adapt Kruskal-Wallis test. You want to adapt Friedman ANOVA. So before adapting these statistics, there must be kind of the nature of the variables which are considered, whether you have numeric or non-numeric. So we have just a brief here that it is not always possible to correct for problem with the distribution of data. So that's why we make use of the non-parametric test, of which in most cases, the assumptions of parametric test are not made. That means you are not forced, it is not necessary for the data to be normally distributed or the variance to be homogeneous or to have an equal variance. That's when we make use of non-parametric tests. So now you'll be questioned if you adapt a certain parametric test under certain conditions. These are some of the examples of the parametric test. Now see the parametric test which intended to explore the relationship among variables, about the correlation, about regression, logistic regression, or factor analysis. Are you interested with the data reduction and the grouping? For sure, you'll go for factor analysis. So you have to plan that. I'm interested you have this kind of information, or you're going to conduct this kind of information, then I will adapt the factor analysis. That means you need to have so many items so that later you can group or drop some of them. Comparison of the non-parametric tests. These are the non-parametric tests which can be used to compare groups. That means you'll be having one or two population. Then this is just a summary of the non-parametric test against the parametric test. For instance, if you want to adapt the independent sample t-test, if the assumptions fails here, then it is recommended you go for the Mann-Whitney U-test. Or the paired sample t-test, you'll be recommended to go to the Wilcoxon-Sandy-Rank test. The same here, Kruskal-Wallis against one-way, Friedman test against one-way repeated measures. So I'm finalizing, I have 1 minute. So as you can see here, this is a summary and the importance of the nature of the data when we are planning for the survey analysis. We have a chi-square logistic regression. We have a continuous variable. You can opt for this one, you can opt for the Poisson distribution or whatever. So when you are planning for the survey analysis, it is very important to consider this one in order to have a very meaningful information. Of course, this word of digital, you can instruct a certain, you can command a certain program or computer, but remember, garbage in, garbage out. Again, this is a summary of which these are some of the tested statistics in relation to the measurement of scale, the discrete, the continuous, in relation to the nature of the variables, that is categorical or binary, as you can see here. So this is just a summary of the correlation and the regression. Of course, we need the dependent variable to be continuous. This is a t-test of which we need a kind of the quantitative variables. Are we making a comparison of one value against a certain? Do we have a independent population of which we can adapt the sample t-test? Do we have a paired sample t-test that we are making a follow-up of that one? Are we interested to compare the location of the distribution of two groups? And we are interested in the Mann-Whitney U-test, then you have to adapt when you have this kind of interest. The same to chi-square. We have a chi-square as a goodness of fit, and we have a chi-square as a for independence. Chi-square test of a goodness of fit, that means you want to find something which, for instance, here, gender influence the level of education. By nature, as you can see, these are the qualitative data. The variables are qualitative by nature. Members, thank you for listening. I think it is time.
Sir. Sir.
Yes.
Dr. Peter, thank you so much for this nice lecture. And in between, we have been receiving a lot of appreciation about your lecture. I hope many have benefited, but we have some queries. So let us take one by one. My colleague, Dr. Sarat, will read out the questions.
Hello, Dr. Peter. So
Yes.
first questions arise from some of the participants. They want to know.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Borrowing books, na? How can we use survey research method to study in and depth aspect of research?
Sorry, pardon your voice.
How can we use survey research method to study in the aspect of a research issue?
To study what?
Yeah, to study the in-depth research. How can we use the survey method in the research? How can we use the survey method?
The survey, you mean the survey methods in the research?
Yes.
How can you use the survey methods in research? I think that's what you are.
How we are using the survey in the research. The participants want to know. It is Ravi Jamal. So one of the participants just want to know the survey. What we used to do is how we use in the research.
So if I understand well, is that, of course, by survey, we can make it, it is equivalent to the research. That means we have a problem, then we wanted to find the solution from that problem. Now, if having this kind of the problem, as I said, that it is very important at the first to identify the problem, to plan for the methods to be used. One is the research tools, for instance. Are you going for the questionnaire? Are you going for the focus group discussion? Are you going for the secondary data? Or whatever. Then from there, you have to plan for the analysis, because normally we do plan for the analysis depending on the objectives. Now, what we are insisting that as we are planning for the survey, at all the time we have to remember that we are going to have the results. Now that one has to be associated with a kind of a test statistics. So we have the research tools, we have the designs, as I've said. Of course, yes. Are you going to conduct a correlational study or an experimental study? So you have to drive a kind of you have to use the appropriate procedure for that one, if I understand you well.
Yeah. Absolutely. One question. Another question is Sahiti Bogireti. He asks how to choose sampling techniques. How to choose sampling techniques.
Okay, how to use the sampling techniques.
Yeah, how to choose or how to use.
Now, as I have said, basically there's no rule of thumb. It depends with the nature of the study. But what we are insisting that it's better to have a kind of a mixed methods and a mixed designs in order to have a reliable and a valid data. For instance, are you interested with a kind of, maybe you have a certain study. Are you interested with a certain population?
Yes.
If that is the case, then you have to go to the stratified sampling techniques to ensure that all the units or those kind of groups that you're interested with, they are included in the study. If, for instance, you make use of the simple random sampling, it is very possible, though it is a probability sampling techniques, but probably very likely also some of the groups of interest of which you want to collect information from that one will be excluded in the study. Or unless otherwise, you go for the systematic sampling technique. Or unless otherwise, you go for the non-probability sampling techniques like convenience sampling techniques, but you have to set for the criteria of inclusion and exclusion in the study.
Okay, thank you, sir. And next, one more questions. So this is from the Arun Namadas, one of the participants of this webinar. So which one is useful? Which one is useful? Small sample in more numbers. Which one is useful? Small sample in more number or large sample in less number?
Small sample in more number?
In more numbers.
Or
large number in less number. Large sample in less number.
In less number.
Yeah.
If I have understood the question, what I will say is that because the world is full of population and we normally go for the sample, it's better to have a small sample, but which is very, very representative.
Okay.
Because if we have to go for the sample, then I think it is not recommended to have a very large sample which is approximately equal to the population.
Okay.
But rather you go for the small sample, but you have to select it very carefully. You have to ensure that you have a very representation from that sample. I think you do that one, then you'll have a good results.
Okay, Dr. Peter. So I just mic over to Professor Sir Jamal.
Can we have our Honorable Vice Chancellor? May I request Honorable Vice Chancellor to address the gathering, sir?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Dr. Peter.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you? Oh, Vice Chancellor.
I'm fine. How are you? I've been listening, just joined 5 minutes late in the beginning. But I've been listening. Your lecture is very good. I was really very happy. And I thank Srinivas for helping me to get you. Your lecture is very good. Very nicely explained. It is a very nice lecture, and I'm very happy. Thank you very much, Dr. Peter.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. It's my pleasure that
Srinivas is also there. No, Srinivas.
Sorry?
Also to join.
Yes, sir, I am on.
His lecture is very good. You agree with me?
Yes.
Very nicely given. So you thank you very much. Hello?
Yeah, voice is not clear, sir.
Voice is not coming, Srinivas.
Voice is not clear, sir.
Yes. So, Srinivas, your voice is not coming.
My voice.
Dr. Srinivas, are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir. Now it's okay. Now it's okay.
Yes. Very good. So actually, I was just joined 5-10 minutes late, but later on I have been listening. Dr. Peter lecture, it is very good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Hope I can meet you in Tanzania sometime.
Yeah, sure. You are welcome. Welcome, sir. My pleasure to meet you.
Meet. Yes. Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
So now my colleague,
So Jamal, you can. Yes.
Dr. JP Singh will propose vote of thanks. Over to JP Singh.
So, good afternoon, all the participants. So now I would like to conclude. This was an excellent webinar. I think here actually most of the participants are from mathematics background, sir, but many are from statistics also. So this lecture basics of survey analysis design actually this is the key for all the research actually for mathematical modeling and whatever. So a research is based on the actually what data and what how we design this to conduct the survey. Sir very nicely actually explain what precaution we have to take, and in the last lecture he actually explained what test we have to apply, and we have noticed due to experience that whatever research we conduct, if we do not apply the proper statistics tools, so it is not very efficient. So sir has enlightened due to his vast experience, and we have seen lots of comment all across the this webinar. So from the participant, so they enjoy this, sir, and it's like brush up their memories, and they will go to some uh, basic again, and they will, I hope they will use this in their research. So we actually we hope, sir, if you, we will be very happy, sir, Peter, sir, if you come to visit our very wonderful Mizoram University. So hopefully you come. So first, I now the vote of thanks part. So my first sincere vote of thanks goes to Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir. His personality is so dynamic that in such a short span time, he arranged this webinar, and it gives actually opportunity to interact such learned personality. Uh, and then I would like to thank Dr. Peter, sir, for this wonderful talk. Then I would like to thanks all the participants, and hope that it will definitely benefit. Thank you, sir. Thank you to everyone.